3 weeks after being separated from Zara, Jake sat in his new office trying to focus on the Mars colony trade negotiations. His new partner, Ambassador Harrison, was a competent diplomat who followed every protocol perfectly, but working with him felt like trying to paint with only gray colors after experiencing the full spectrum. Jake's communication device chimed with an urgent message from Director Collins. "Morrison, report to my office immediately. We have a situation." Jake found Collins pacing behind her desk, her expression more worried than angry. "Sit down, Jake. We need to discuss your former partner. What about Zara? Is she okay?" "That's what we're trying to determine. 3 days ago, she was supposed to report to her new assignment in the Cultural Exchange Department. She never showed up." Jake felt his heart skip a beat. "What do you mean she never showed up?" "I mean she's missing. Her quarters at the diplomatic residence are empty, and no one has seen her since last weekend. We've checked with all the transportation hubs, but there's no record of her leaving Earth. Have you contacted the Veltar delegation? Maybe she went to them for help." Collins shook her head grimly. "That's where things get complicated. This morning, we received a formal communication from the Veltar High Council. They're demanding that Zara be returned to their custody immediately for what they call corrective treatment." Jake stood up abruptly. "Corrective treatment? What does that mean?" "According to their message, Zara's behavior during the negotiations has been reported as evidence of severe emotional instability. They want to bring her back to their homeworld for medical intervention." "Medical intervention," Jake repeated, feeling sick. "You mean they want to destroy everything that makes her who she is?" "Jake, I know you care about your former partner, but this is a delicate diplomatic situation. We can't interfere with internal Veltar affairs." "This isn't an internal affair," Jake said angrily. "Zara is here under coalition protection. She's entitled to the same rights as any other diplomat. Not if her own government considers her mentally unfit for duty." Jake began pacing the office, his mind racing. "Director, you read our reports. You know how successful our partnership was. Zara isn't mentally unfit. She's exactly what diplomatic relations need more of." "That may be true, but it doesn't change the legal situation. If we refuse to cooperate with the Veltar government, it could damage our entire relationship with their species. And if we hand her over to be lobotomized, what does that say about our commitment to protecting people who work with us?" Collins sighed and sat down heavily. "Jake, I understand your concerns, but my hands are tied. The Secretary General has already indicated that we need to comply with the Veltar request to avoid a major diplomatic incident." Jake felt something snap inside him. "So we're going to sacrifice someone who trusted us and worked hard for our success just to avoid making waves? Watch your tone, Morrison. You're walking a very thin line here." "No, Director. I think you're the one walking the thin line. Zara helped us achieve something unprecedented, and now we're going to betray her. Trust by handing her over to people who want to destroy her mind." "That's enough," Collins said sharply. "This decision is final. If Zara contacts you, or if you have any information about her whereabouts, you are to report it immediately. Is that understood?" "Yes, Director," Jake said, but he was already making plans that had nothing to do with following orders. That evening, Jake sat in his apartment trying to think of where Zara might have gone. She didn't have many friends on Earth, and her knowledge of human society was limited. But she was intelligent and resourceful, and she had 3 days to plan her disappearance. His communication device chimed with an incoming message from an unknown sender. The text was brief. "Lake Geneva, East Shore, midnight. Come alone." Jake's heart raced as he recognized the writing style. It had to be Zara. He grabbed his coat and headed for the door, knowing that he was about to make a decision that would change his life forever. The lake was peaceful under the starlight, with gentle waves lapping against the shore. Jake walked along the water's edge until he saw a figure sitting on a fallen log about 50 meters away. Even in the darkness, he recognized Zara's silhouette. "I wasn't sure you would come," she said as he approached. Of course I came. Are you okay? Everyone's been looking for you. I know. I've been staying in a small inn in the mountains, paying with what little money I had saved. But I can't hide forever. Jake sat down beside her on the log. Zara, they want to take you back to your homeworld. Colin says it's for medical treatment, but I think we both know what that really means. Corrective treatment, Zara said bitterly. They want to eliminate my emotional variance permanently. After the treatment, I'll be just like every other Veltar, logical, efficient, and completely empty inside. We can't let that happen. There has to be something we can do. Jake, I've been thinking about this for weeks. Ever since our partnership was dissolved, I've known this day would come. My superiors sent me here expecting me to fail, but when I succeeded instead, it made them even more determined to prove that emotional variance is dangerous. But you didn't fail. We accomplished something incredible together. Exactly. And that's what terrifies them. If other Veltar see that emotional beings can be successful, it might make them question the entire foundation of our society. Jake stared out at the water, feeling helpless. So what do we do? I've been thinking about that too. Jake, what if I didn't go back? What if I requested asylum here on Earth? Is that possible? I don't know. It's never been done before. But according to Coalition law, any being has the right to request protection from persecution based on their natural characteristics. Jake felt a spark of hope. That's exactly what this is. They're persecuting you for being emotionally variant, which is a natural part of who you are. The question is whether Earth will be willing to protect me. It would mean a major diplomatic crisis with the Veltar government. Let me worry about that, Jake said, standing up. I think I know someone who might be able to help. Jake, if you do this, it could destroy your career. You could be charged with interfering in diplomatic affairs or even treason. Then that's a risk I'm willing to take. Zara, working with you showed me what diplomacy could really be about. It's not about following rules and maintaining the status quo. It's about protecting people and building bridges between different ways of thinking. Are you sure? Once we start down this path, there's no going back. Jake looked at her in the moonlight and saw the fear and hope warring in her purple eyes. I'm sure. You trusted me enough to be yourself when everyone else wanted you to change. Now it's my turn to trust you enough to do the right thing, even if it's dangerous. Thank you, Jake. Whatever happens, I want you to know that our partnership meant everything to me. For the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere. You do belong. And I'm going to make sure you have the chance to keep being yourself. As they walked back toward the city, Jake was already planning their next move. He knew it would be dangerous and that they would face opposition from both governments. But he also knew that some things were worth fighting for, and Zara's right to be herself was definitely one of them. The real battle was just beginning. But for the first time since their partnership had been dissolved, Jake felt like he was doing something that mattered. He was standing up for someone who had shown him what it meant to be truly human in a galaxy that often seemed to value conformity over authenticity. Tomorrow, he will contact the Coalition Human Rights Commission and formally request asylum for Zara. Whatever happened after that, they would face it together. 2 months into their partnership, Jake and Zara had achieved something that no one had expected, including themselves. They had successfully negotiated not just a trade agreement between Earth and the Veltar homeworld, but a 3-way deal. That included the crystalline Nexari species as well. The breakthrough had come when Jake noticed something that everyone else had missed. During the negotiations with the Nexari representatives, their crystal formations would change color and emit different harmonic frequencies depending on the topic being discussed. Most diplomats treated these changes as meaningless background noise, but Jake had begun to suspect there was more to it. Zara, have you noticed how the Nexari crystals react differently when we talk about different subjects? Jake asked during one of their late-night planning sessions. Zara looked up from her notes, her purple eyes bright with curiosity. You mean the color changes and the humming sounds? I thought that was just normal for their species. I think it might be more than that. Watch Ambassador Keffer's crystal formation tomorrow when we discuss the mineral rights. I have a feeling those changes aren't random. The next day, Jake and Zara paid careful attention to the Nexari delegation during the negotiations. Sure. Enough. When the discussion turned to topics that seemed to please them, their crystals glowed with warm golden light and produced harmonious tones. When something displeased them, the crystals turned darker and created discordant sounds. They're communicating through emotional resonance, Zara whispered to Jake during the break. The crystals are responding to their feelings, not just their logical thoughts. Exactly, Jake replied. And if we can understand their emotional responses, we can find solutions that truly satisfy everyone. That afternoon, Jake decided to try something that went against all traditional diplomatic protocol. Instead of presenting dry facts and logical arguments, he began to speak about the human emotional connection to the resources they were discussing. He talked about how the rare minerals from Veltar space would help build homes for human families, and how the agricultural products from Earth would nourish growing communities. The Nexari crystals immediately began to glow with warm, golden light. Ambassador Keffer's formation produced a series of harmonious tones that seemed to echo throughout the room. Even the normally stoic Veltar delegation appeared surprised by the positive response. Zara, understanding what Jake was doing, began to add her own emotional insights to the discussion. She spoke about the joy that successful cooperation would bring to all three species, and how the trade agreement would create lasting bonds of friendship between their worlds. For the first time in the negotiations, all three delegations were responding positively to the same proposals. The Nexari crystals sang with harmonious frequencies. The Veltar delegates nodded their approval, and the human representatives smiled with genuine satisfaction. I think we have the foundation for a real agreement, Jake announced. One that addresses not just the practical needs of our species, but the emotional satisfaction of knowing we're building something meaningful together. The final agreement was signed 3 weeks later, and the news spread quickly throughout the coalition. Jake and Zara had not only succeeded in their original mission, but had created a new model for interspecies diplomacy that took emotional factors into account alongside logical considerations. Director Collins called them into her office the day after the signing ceremony. For the first time since Jake had known her, she looked genuinely pleased. Congratulations, both of you, she said, gesturing for them to sit. This agreement is being hailed as a breakthrough in coalition trade relations. The Secretary General himself has requested a full report on your methods. Thank you, Director, Jake replied. We're both very proud of what we accomplished, as you should be. Jake, I'm recommending you for promotion to Senior Diplomatic Advisor. This success has shown that you have the skills needed for advanced negotiations. Jake felt a surge of pride, but he also felt something else, a need to make sure Zara received proper recognition for her contributions. Director, I need to emphasize that this success was only possible because of Zara's unique insights. Her ability to understand the emotional aspects of the negotiations was crucial to our breakthrough. Collins nodded, but Jake noticed a slight frown cross her face. Yes, well, that's something we need to discuss. Jake, you've done excellent work, but I'm concerned about your methods. Some of the other species representatives have commented on your partner's unusual emotional displays during the negotiations. What do you mean unusual? Zara asked quietly. I mean that several delegates have expressed surprise at your level of emotional expression. They're not accustomed to seeing such open displays of feeling from Veltar representatives. Jake felt anger rising in his chest. Director, those emotional displays were exactly what made our negotiations successful. Zara's ability to connect with others on an emotional level is what allowed us to find solutions that satisfied everyone. Perhaps, Collins said carefully, but we need to be concerned about how this might affect future negotiations. Other species might see emotional expression as a sign of weakness or instability. Or they might see it as a sign of honesty and genuine desire for cooperation, Jake countered. The Nexari certainly responded positively to our approach. Colin stood up and walked to the window, her back to them. Jake, I'm going to give you some advice. You've done excellent work, and you have a bright future ahead of you. But that future depends on your ability to maintain professional standards and work within established protocols. What are you saying exactly? Jake asked. I'm saying that your next assignment will be with a different partner. Someone who can help you develop a more traditional approach to diplomacy. Jake felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. You're breaking up our partnership. I'm reassigning you to positions that better suit your individual strengths. Collins replied, Jake, you'll be working with Ambassador Harrison on the new Mars colony trade negotiations. Zara will be returning the standard cultural exchange duties. But we work well together, Zara protested. Our success proves that. Your success was admirable, Collins said, but it was also unconventional. The diplomatic corps value stability and predictability. We can't have partnerships that rely on emotional intuition when lives and entire civilizations might depend on the outcomes. Jake stood up, his hands clenched into fists. Director, with all due respect, I think you're making a mistake. Our emotional approach didn't make us unstable. It made us more effective. That's enough, Morrison, Collins said sharply. This decision is final. You'll both report to your new assignments on Monday. As they left Collins' office, Jake felt devastated. Not only was he losing the best working relationship of his career, but he was watching Zara being punished for the very qualities that made her exceptional. I'm sorry, he said to Zara as they walked back to their office. This is my fault. I should have been more careful about following protocol. No, Jake, Zara replied, her voice sad but determined. This isn't your fault. This is exactly what my superiors expected would happen. They wanted me to fail, and in their eyes, being reassigned to lesser duties is proof that I'm not suitable for important work. But that's not true. We succeeded. Beyond anyone's expectations. Yes, but we succeeded by being ourselves instead of following the rules. And apparently, that's not acceptable. They spent their last day as partners cleaning out their office and finishing their final reports. The atmosphere was somber, but Jake noticed that Zara seemed more determined than sad. What are you thinking? He asked. I'm thinking that maybe it's time to stop trying to fit into other people's expectations, Zara said. Maybe it's time to show them that emotional intelligence isn't a weakness. It's the future of interspecies cooperation. Jake looked at her with admiration. Even facing professional disappointment, she was ready to keep fighting for what she believed in. Whatever happens next, he said, I want you to know that working with you has changed my life. You've shown me that being different isn't something to hide or apologize for. And you've shown me that there are people in the universe who value authenticity over conformity, Zara replied. Whatever they do to us, they can't take that away. As they prepared to leave their office for the last time, Jake realized that their partnership had accomplished something more important than any trade agreement. They had proven that emotional connection and understanding could bridge the gap between species in ways that pure logic never could. Now they just had to figure out how to convince the rest of the galaxy that their approach was worth pursuing. Jake and Zara had been working together for 3 weeks, and their partnership had developed into something neither of them had expected. What started as a professional assignment had become a genuine friendship, built on mutual respect and shared curiosity about each other's worlds. Their office had become a comfortable space where they could work freely without the rigid protocols that govern most diplomatic interactions. Zara had brought some plants from her homeworld that created a soft, pleasant fragrance, while Jake had added a small music player that filled the room with gentle background melodies during their long work sessions. I still don't understand. Why do Granite want to trade their crystal formations for our wheat? Zara said, reviewing the latest trade proposals. They don't eat organic matter, and they have no apparent use for agricultural products. Jake looked up from his own papers. Maybe they're not planning to use the wheat themselves. They might be trading it to another species that needs it. That would make sense, Zara agreed, making notes on her tablet. The Granite are excellent middlemen because they're so patient and methodical. They can wait years for the right deal to come along. It was nearly midnight, and they were the only ones left in the embassy. Jake had offered to continue working alone, but Zara had insisted on staying. She claimed that her species needed less sleep than humans, though Jake suspected she simply enjoyed their late-night conversations as much as he did. "Jake, can I ask you something personal?" Zara said suddenly, setting down her tablet. "Of course." "Why? Did you become a diplomat? I mean, what made you choose this particular career?" Jake leaned back in his chair and considered the question. "I suppose I've always been interested in understanding different perspectives. Even as a child, I was curious about why people thought and acted differently from me. When first contact happened, I knew I wanted to be part of building bridges between species. And do you enjoy it? The work, I mean?" "Most of the time, yes. Though I have to admit, working with you has been more enjoyable than any assignment I've had before." Zara's face lit up with that bright smile that Jake had come to love seeing. "Really? I feel the same way. I've never had a working relationship that felt so natural and easy." "Speaking of which," Jake said, "I've been curious about something. You're so different from what I was told to expect about your species. All the briefing materials said that Veltar are emotionally controlled and logical to the point of being cold. But you're warm and expressive and obviously capable of deep feelings." Zara's expression grew more serious, and she was quiet for a long moment. "That's because most of my species is exactly as you were told. What you weren't told is that some of us are different." "Different how?" Zara stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights below. "Several centuries ago, my people decided that emotions were inefficient and potentially dangerous. They led to conflicts, jealousy, and irrational decisions. So the government instituted a program of genetic modification and cultural conditioning to eliminate strong emotional responses." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. They eliminated emotions? How is that even possible? "Through careful breeding programs and medical treatments administered from birth, each generation became more emotionally restricted than the last. Within a few hundred years, most Veltar could barely feel happiness, sadness, anger, or love. They became perfect logical beings, able to make decisions based purely on facts and efficiency." "But you're not like that at all," Jake said, joining her at the window. "No, I'm not. About 5% of Veltar are born with what they call emotional variance. We are essentially throwbacks to what our species was like before the modifications. We can feel the full range of emotions that our ancestors experienced." "And how does your society treat people with emotional variance?" Zara's laugh was bitter. "They tolerate us barely. We're seen as defective, unstable, and unsuitable for important work. Most of us are assigned to low-level jobs where our emotional problems won't cause too much damage." Jake stared at her in amazement. "But that's terrible. You're one of the most capable people I've ever worked with. Your emotional intelligence actually makes you better at problem solving, not worse." "You really think so?" Zara asked, turning to face him. "I know so. The way you read people during negotiations, how you pick up on subtle cues that I miss completely, your ability to find creative solutions that satisfy everyone involved. All of that comes from your emotional capacity." "Not despite it." Zara's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Jake, I have to tell you something. This assignment wasn't given to me as a reward or recognition of my skills. It was given to me because my superiors expected me to fail." "What do you mean?" "They wanted to prove that emotionally variant Veltar are unsuitable for important diplomatic work. They chose me specifically because they thought my emotions would interfere with the negotiations and embarrass our species." They expected me to break down under pressure or make some terrible mistake that would justify their prejudice against people like me. Jake felt anger rising in his chest. That's incredibly unfair. They set you up to fail. Yes, but they didn't count on one thing, Zara said, her smile returning. They didn't count on me being partnered with someone who would value my differences instead of being threatened by them. What do you mean? Jake, working with you has been the happiest time of my entire life. For the first time, I'm in an environment where I can be myself completely. I don't have to hide my enthusiasm or pretend I don't care about things. I can express my thoughts and feelings freely, and instead of being criticized for it, I'm encouraged and supported. Jake felt his heart swell with emotion. Zara, I want you to know that your emotional capacity isn't a flaw or a problem. It's a gift. You see things that purely logical beings miss. You understand people in ways that cold analysis never could. Do you really mean that? Absolutely. In fact, I think your species made a terrible mistake when they decided to eliminate emotions. They may have gained efficiency, but they lost something much more valuable: the ability to truly connect with others and find creative solutions through empathy and understanding. Zara wiped away a tear that had escaped despite her efforts to control it. I've thought the same thing, but I've never had anyone to share that thought with. On my world, saying something like that would be considered seditious. Well, you're not on your world now, Jake said gently. You're here with me, and I think your emotional variance makes you exactly the right person for this job. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the city lights twinkle below. Jake realized that something fundamental had changed in their relationship. What had started as professional cooperation had become something deeper, a friendship based on mutual acceptance and understanding. Jake, Zara said quietly, can I tell you something else? Something I've never told anyone? Of course. I've always wondered what it would be like to live in a society where emotions were valued instead of suppressed, where people could express joy, sadness, anger, and love without being seen as broken or defective. Maybe you don't have to wonder anymore, Jake said. Maybe you can experience it firsthand. What do you mean? I mean that you're experiencing it right now, here with me in this partnership. You're free to be yourself completely, and I value every aspect of who you are. Zara turned to face him fully, her purple eyes bright with emotion. You have no idea how much that means to me. For the first time in my life, I feel like I belong somewhere. You do belong, Jake said firmly. And I hope you know that no matter what happens with this assignment, you'll always have a friend in me. Thank you, Jake. That means more to me than you could possibly imagine. They returned to their work, but the atmosphere in the room had changed. There was a new level of trust and understanding between them, a bond that went beyond professional cooperation. Jake realized that Zara had given him a tremendous gift by sharing her truth with him, and he was determined to prove that her emotional variance was indeed a strength, not a weakness. As they worked through the night, Jake found himself thinking about the implications of what Zara had told him. If her society had deliberately eliminated emotions from their people, what other important aspects of life and consciousness might they have lost? And more importantly, what could humanity offer to the galaxy that other species might be missing? The questions would have to wait for another day. But Jake had a feeling that understanding Zara's experience was going to change not just their partnership, but his entire perspective on what it meant to be human in a galaxy full of alien minds. The Coalition Embassy in Geneva was a massive structure that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Its walls were made of a translucent material that changed color throughout the day, reflecting the emotions and thoughts of the beings inside. Jake had visited the embassy many times over the years, but walking through its corridors with Zara made him see it with fresh eyes. The walls are responding to our presence, Zara said, pointing to the soft blue glow that followed them down the hallway. They're reading our emotional states and adjusting the environment accordingly. It's fascinating how different species have developed such varied approaches to architecture. Jake nodded, though he had never really thought about the embassy walls as anything more than decoration. What do the colors mean exactly? Blue indicates calm cooperation, which makes sense since we're both feeling positive about our partnership. If we were angry or hostile, the walls would shift to red or orange. It's a way of maintaining harmony in a building where dozens of different species work together. They reached their assigned office on the 15th floor. The room was spacious but simple, with 2 desks, a large conference table, and a wall-mounted screen for communications. The window offered a stunning view of Lake Geneva, with the Alps visible in the distance. Zara immediately walked to the window and stood there for several minutes, just watching the water. On my homeworld, we have synthetic environments that provide everything we need, but nothing like this, she said softly. The water moves so freely, and the mountains look different every time the light changes. It's beautiful. Jake joined her at the window. I've lived here for 10 years, and I still love this view. There's something peaceful about water that never gets old. Peaceful, Zara repeated the word as if she were tasting it. That's exactly the right word. On Kepler 442b, everything is designed for maximum efficiency. Beautiful, yes, but in a controlled way. This feels more alive. They spent the morning reviewing their assignment files. Their primary task was to establish trade protocols between Earth and the Veltar homeworld, focusing on rare Earth minerals that Earth needed and agricultural products that the Veltar could use. It seemed straightforward enough, but Jake knew that galactic trade negotiations were rarely simple. The standard approach would be to create a point-by-point comparison of what each side wants and needs, Jake explained, spreading the documents across the table. Then we negotiate terms that satisfy both parties. Zara studied the papers with intense concentration, but Jake noticed that she kept glancing up at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Jake, can I ask you something? How do you feel about this assignment? Not just professionally, but personally. I feel good about it, Jake said, surprised by the directness of her question. Why do you ask? Because I've been reading about human emotions, and I think understanding how you feel might help us work better together. In my culture, we focus only on logic and efficiency, but I've always wondered if there might be value in considering emotional factors as well. Jake set down the papers and looked at her carefully. That's an interesting perspective. Most of the alien species I work with prefer to keep emotions out of business discussions. Maybe that's why so many negotiations fail, Zara said with a small smile. If both sides are hiding their true feelings, how can they find solutions that actually satisfy everyone? Before Jake could respond, his communication device chimed with an incoming message. Director Collins appeared on the screen, her expression as stern as ever. Morrison, I need you and your partner to attend a formal dinner tonight at the embassy. Several coalition representatives will be there, and it's important that you make a good impression. Of course, Director. We'll be there. Good. And Morrison? Make sure your partner understands the importance of proper diplomatic protocol. This isn't a social gathering. The screen went dark, and Jake turned to Zara with an apologetic look. I'm sorry about that. Director Collins can be a bit intense. She seems very focused on following rules, Zara observed. Is that typical of human authority figures? Some of them, yes. The diplomatic corps values tradition and protocol above almost everything else. It's supposed to prevent misunderstandings between species. Zara nodded thoughtfully. I understand the logic, but I wonder if strict protocol might sometimes create barriers instead of removing them. That evening, Jake and Zara arrived at the embassy's main dining hall. The room was filled with representatives from dozens of species, all dressed in their finest formal attire. Jake wore his best suit, while Zara had chosen a flowing silver gown that complemented her skin tone perfectly. The dinner began with the usual formal introductions and speeches. Jake watched as various ambassadors and officials exchanged pleasantries in the careful, measured way that diplomatic events required. Everything was polite and proper, but also somewhat cold and distant. Zara seemed to be enjoying herself despite the formal atmosphere. She listened intently to every conversation and asked thoughtful questions about different species' customs and traditions. Jake noticed that several other alien representatives seemed genuinely interested in talking with her, something that rarely happened at these events. The trouble began during the cultural presentation portion of the evening. A human string quartet was performing classical music, and Jake watched as Zara's expression grew more and more animated. Her eyes sparkled with delight, and she began to sway slightly in her chair in time with the music. "This is incredible," she whispered to Jake. "The way the sounds blend together to create something completely new. We have music on my world, but it's much more structured and mathematical. This feels so free and expressive." Unfortunately, Zara's enthusiasm was noticed by others in the room. Jake saw Ambassador Keffer of the next story lean over to whisper something to his companion, who then looked directly at Zara with obvious surprise. At another table, a group of Veltar officials were having what appeared to be a heated discussion while glancing in their direction. When the music ended, Zara began to clap enthusiastically, clearly moved by the performance. This was apparently the wrong thing to do, as several aliens around the room turned to stare at her. Jake realized that her emotional response was being seen as inappropriate by some of the other species present. "Zara," he whispered, "maybe we should tone it down." "A bit?" "Why?" she asked, genuinely confused. The music was beautiful. Shouldn't we show appreciation for beautiful things? Before Jake could answer, Ambassador Deckmore of the Veltar delegation approached their table. He was an elderly male with the characteristic silver-blue skin, but his expression was cold and disapproving. "Zarathic," he said in a voice that carried across the room, "your behavior this evening has been highly inappropriate. Such emotional displays are not befitting of a Veltar representative." Jake watched as Zara's face flushed a deeper shade of blue. "I apologize, Ambassador. I was simply enjoying the music." "Enjoyment is not the purpose of diplomatic gatherings," Deckmore replied sternly. "I suggest you remember your training and conduct yourself with proper Veltar dignity." The ambassador returned to his table, leaving Zara looking embarrassed and hurt. Jake felt anger rising in his chest at the way she had been treated, but he forced himself to remain calm. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. "I'm fine," Zara said, but her voice was shaky. "I suppose I forgot where I was for a moment." "There's nothing wrong with appreciating good music," Jake said firmly. "I thought your reaction was perfectly normal." Zara looked at him with surprise. "Really? You don't think I embarrassed myself?" "Not at all. If anything, I think the room was too stuffy. A little genuine emotion might do everyone some good." For the rest of the evening, Zara was much more subdued. She spoke only when directly addressed and showed no further signs of the enthusiasm that had made her so interesting to talk with. Jake found himself missing her earlier excitement and wondering why emotional expression was considered so dangerous by her species. As they prepared to leave, Jake made a decision. "Zara, would you like to get some coffee? I know a place that's open late, and it's much more relaxed than this." Her face brightened immediately. "I'd love that. I have so many questions about human music and culture." Walking out of the embassy together, Jake realized that he was starting to understand something important about his new partner. Zara wasn't just different from other Veltar he had heard about. She was someone who saw the world with genuine curiosity and wonder. If that was considered a flaw by her species, then perhaps there was something wrong with their way of thinking. Not with her. The coffee shop was nearly empty, and they found a quiet corner table where they could talk freely. For the first time since the dinner, Zara seemed to relax completely. "Thank you for defending me back there," she said. "Most people would have agreed with Ambassador Deckmer." "Most people would have been wrong," Jake replied. "I think your enthusiasm is one of your best qualities." Zara smiled, and Jake realized that he was looking forward to working with her more than he had looked forward to anything in years. Jake Morrison sat at his desk on the 32nd floor of the United Earth Government building in Geneva, staring at the message that had just appeared on his screen. He read it 3 times before the words finally sank in. He was being assigned to the Cultural Exchange Partnership Program with the Galactic Coalition. After 15 years of handling minor trade disputes and processing visa applications, this was the biggest assignment of his career. The message was short but clear. Jake will be working with a partner from the Veltar species to establish new trade protocols between Earth and their homeworld. The partnership would last 6 months, and success could mean promotion to the senior diplomatic corps. Jake had always dreamed of working directly with alien species, but he had never imagined it would actually happen to him. He grabbed his coffee mug and walked to the window. Below, the streets of Geneva buzzed with activity. Humans and aliens moved together through the crowds, a sight that still amazed Jake even after 20 years of first contact. When he was a child, aliens were just stories in books and movies. Now they were his neighbors, his co-workers, and apparently his new partner. Jake's supervisor, Director Collins, appeared at his office door. She was a stern woman in her 50s, who rarely smiled, but today she looked almost pleased. "Congratulations, Morrison," she said. "This is a big opportunity. Don't mess it up." "Thank you, Director. I won't let you down." Jake tried to sound confident, but his hands were shaking slightly. "Can you tell me more about my partner?" "The message just said she's Veltar." Collins nodded and handed him a thick folder. "Her name is Zarathik. The Veltar are known for their logical thinking and emotional control. They're very efficient workers, but they can be cold and distant. Don't expect warm conversations or friendly jokes. Just focus on the work and try to learn from her analytical approach." Jake opened the folder and looked at the photograph inside. Zarathik had silver blue skin that seemed to shimmer in the light. Her eyes were larger than human eyes, a deep purple color that reminded Jake of twilight. Her features were delicate and symmetrical, almost too perfect to be real. She looked serious in the photo, with no hint of emotion on her face. "She's arriving today," Collins continued. "You'll meet her at the New Geneva spaceport at 1400 hours. The Coalition transport is scheduled to land on Platform 7. After that, you'll both report to the embassy for your initial briefing." Jake spent the rest of the morning reading about Veltar culture. According to the files, they had eliminated most emotional responses from their society centuries ago through genetic modification and cultural conditioning. They valued logic, efficiency, and order above all else. Personal relationships were based on mutual benefit rather than affection. Romance and friendship as humans understood them simply didn't exist in their culture. The more Jake read, the more nervous he became. He was known among his colleagues for being too emotional, too empathetic for serious diplomatic work. How would he work with someone who saw emotions as weakness? How could he build the trust and cooperation needed for successful negotiations? At noon, Jake took the maglev train to the spaceport. The building was a marvel of human and alien engineering, with sweeping curves and crystalline walls that changed color based on the time of day. Ships from dozens of different species landed and departed every few minutes, their designs ranging from sleek human vessels to the bizarre, organic shapes favored by the Nexari. Platform 7 was busy with ground crew preparing for the incoming Coalition transport. Jake checked his watch and saw that he was 30 minutes early. He found a bench where he could watch the arrival area and tried to calm his nerves. This was his chance to prove himself, to show that he could work with alien partners just as well as anyone else. The Coalition transport appeared as a silver dot in the sky, growing larger as it approached. It was unlike any human ship Jake had ever seen, with smooth curves and no visible engines or weapons. The ship landed with barely a whisper, settling onto the platform like a feather touching water. A ramp extended from the ship's side, and passengers began to emerge. Jake recognized several species from his training materials. Tall, insectoid Kefmori with their clicking speech patterns. The rock-like granite who moved with slow, deliberate steps. And finally, a single Veltar female who had to be his partner. But something was wrong. According to everything Jake had read, Veltar maintained perfect emotional control at all times. They moved with calm confidence and showed no signs of nervousness or excitement. The woman walking down the ramp was definitely Veltar, with the characteristic silver blue skin and large purple eyes. But she was looking around with obvious curiosity and what could only be described as enthusiasm. She carried a small bag and kept fidgeting with a device on her wrist. When she spotted Jake holding the identification sign with her name, her face lit up with something that looked remarkably like joy. She hurried over to him with quick, eager steps. "You must be Jake Morrison," she said, extending her hand for a handshake. Her voice was melodic, with an accent that made every word sound like music. "I'm Zarathic, but please, just call me Zara. I'm so excited to be working with you." Jake shook her hand, surprised by the warmth of her grip and the genuine smile on her face. "It's nice to meet you, Zara. Welcome to Earth." "Thank you. This is my first time on your planet, and I have to say, it's even more beautiful than I imagined. The sky is such an amazing blue, and the clouds are so white and fluffy. We don't have anything like this on Kepler 442b. Jake stared at her in amazement. Not only was she showing emotion, she was practically bubbling with excitement. Everything he had been told about Veltar emotional suppression seemed to be completely wrong, at least when it came to Zara. "I hope you don't mind me saying," Jake said carefully, "but you seem very different from what I expected. The briefing material said that Veltar don't usually show much emotion." Zara's smile faltered slightly, and she looked down at her hands. "Yes, well, I suppose I'm not exactly typical of my species. I hope that won't be a problem for our partnership." "Not at all," Jake said quickly. "I think it's wonderful. I was actually worried that we might not be able to work together effectively because of cultural differences. But you seem very easy to talk to." Her smile returned, brighter than before. "Really? That's such a relief. I was nervous about meeting you. I've studied human culture extensively, and I find it fascinating how you express yourself so freely. On my world, that kind of openness is considered unusual." They walked together toward the spaceport exit, and Jake found himself genuinely enjoying Zara's company. She asked questions about everything they passed, from the architecture of the building to the different species of people they encountered. Her curiosity was infectious, and Jake found himself seeing familiar sights through her eyes as they reached the transport that would take them to the embassy. Zara suddenly stopped and turned to him. "Jake, can I ask you something? Are you happy about this partnership? I mean, genuinely happy, not just professionally satisfied." The question caught Jake off guard. In his years of diplomatic work, no one had ever asked him about his personal feelings regarding an assignment. "Yes," he said, surprised by his own honesty. "I actually am happy. I've always wanted to work directly with alien species, and I have a good feeling about us working together." Zara's entire face seemed to glow. "With pleasure. That's wonderful. I feel the same way. I think we're going to accomplish great things together." As they settled into the transport, Jake realized that everything he thought he knew about this assignment had just changed. Instead of working with a cold, logical alien who would barely tolerate his presence, he was partnered with someone who seemed genuinely excited about their collaboration. For the first time in years, Jake felt truly optimistic about his future in the diplomatic corps. The transport pulled away from the spaceport, carrying them toward what Jake suspected would be the most interesting 6 months of his career.